Obviously, the Blue Jackets this year were a lot better than anyone expected, but just how much better were they than last season? We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, I also have to let you know, before we get started, that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com to get started. Should be an interesting episode today. I've pulled up a bunch of stats for the Blue Jackets this year and last year. And so obviously, just based on standings alone, we know that the Blue Jackets finished in a much better place than they did last season. But where did they improve the most? Like, how much improvement was there? My vague thought is that the Blue Jackets might be one of the most improved teams all season. Like, for me, the most improved teams are them and Washington. And I get Washington, I think, wins because they went from being a potential playoff team or like a team that kind of fell into the playoffs by accident to winning the Eastern Conference. When I was looking it up, they had something like a plus 90 increase on their goal differential. And like, that's not the be all and end all of it, obviously, but like they were the two most improved teams all season. And so I wanted to look today into, okay, how much better were the Blue Jackets this season in terms of creating offense, in terms of like literally just scoring goals, in terms of some of the easier to understand advanced stats. I wanted to look at which players had better seasons and which players had career seasons, because I think there was about 7 or 8 Blue Jackets that had career seasons this year, maybe more, depending. I haven't added them up, but we'll take a look at that in a second here. And then, today is mostly just going to be about like talking about the information. And then I think tomorrow what I want to do is try and look at like, okay, well, why is this happening? Like, why are they such a better team at scoring goals? Why are they so much better on special teams? And special teams, they're not like the most improved, but they do improve in some areas. So we'll talk about all of that, and we'll probably talk about a little bit more as well. So I wanted to get started just with like some of the more basic stats, and that is just like straight up and down standings position, right? The Blue Jackets last season finished. Let me pull up the conference rankings. They finished at the very bottom of the Eastern Conference, 16th overall, with 66 points in 82 games, a record of 27, 43, and 12. They had a goal differential of negative 63. And this season, like, just straight up, they finished, I think, 10th in the conference, 9th in the conference, excuse me. 89 points in 82 games. They hit 40 wins for the first time in, I think the last time they hit 40 wins might have been that 2019 season against the Lightning. They hit 40 wins, 33 losses, 9 overtime losses, and a goal differential of +5. This is impressive for many reasons. But as of right now, just straight up, this was a team that was better at scoring goals and a team that was better at not allowing goals. They got 13 more wins this season than last season, and they finished 2 points out of the playoffs. And the annoying thing is they finished with the same number of wins as the Montreal Canadiens, same number of regulation wins as well. Like, if they had gotten 2 more overtime points, they would be in the playoffs. And again, we can't get into, oh, well, if they'd won this game, they'd be there. Or if they'd won that game, like, there are plenty of games like that. Like, again, I still think about that Red Wings game that they lost with like a minute left, or the Rangers game that they lost with like 30 seconds left, if they'd forced overtime on both of those games, they'd be in the playoffs right now. But they're not. They're here, and they still took a huge, huge step forward this season, which honestly, the Blue Jackets were expected to take a step before losing Johnny Gaudreau. Obviously, the Blue Jackets last summer, spent a lot of time talking about, well, we expect them to be better. They're going to be better coached. They are going to be, they're going to look a little bit different up front. I think John Waddell, when he took the job last summer, it was like, right, well, there's probably going to be, between 6 and 8 players that are going to be new to the Blue Jackets roster this season. And I don't think he was very far off on that, actually, but they were expected to be a better team. I don't think they were expected to be this much better, even with Johnny Gaudreau in the lineup. They were a team that might challenge for the playoffs, and then they lose Johnny Gaudreau, right? And the expectations just spiral into the toilet, and I'm not going to sit here and listen to the people that said that they were going to be worse than the expansion era Capitals this year. But there were people that were like, you know what? The Blue Jackets might win 20 games this season, or the Blue Jackets are going to finish, top 3, or, Frank Saravalli saying, well, hey, Johnny Gaudreau is going to give them the first overall pick in possibly the most tone-deaf statement I've ever heard from him, which is saying something, but the expectations were not there at all. Even if, new coach, new GM, ton of new players, losing Johnny Gaudreau, I think, the expectations for the team were in the toilet. A, because they lost a player of that caliber, and B, because they lost him in such a sudden, senseless, horrific way. He was 31 years old. His best friend signed with the team to play with him. I think everyone in the world would have understood, A, if Sean Monahan had a terrible season, and B, if the Blue Jackets as a whole had a terrible season, because that kind of stuff messes you up, right? They didn't. They took it. They built on it. They held onto it. And I don't know. And again, whether this is sustainable or not is something that we'll talk about kind of in the coming episodes. But the Blue Jackets this season were a much, much better team than last season. Just on the surface, they got more points and more wins and scored more goals and allowed fewer goals than they did last season. When you look into the underlying stats, though, they have not improved as much on the underlying stats, as they improved on the outward stats, which I'm sure that some people, they don't care about that. They care about the ones on the scoreboard, which is absolutely fine and valid. I respect people who engage with the sport like that. But there is, there's correlation, there's causation, etc., etc. The Blue Jackets were a very good team this season, offensively speaking. They were not a great team goaltendingly speaking. That's not a word, but we're going to go with it. Defensively speaking, I think they improved, but not as much as they need to, right? So again, we'll talk about all of those. We'll look into all of those in a little bit more detail in just a second here. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, like I said, we'll talk about individual categories of where the Blue Jackets improved and how much they improved by. So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I want to tell you about FanDuel, because the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player or team. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today if your first $5 bet wins. That is FanDuel.com, home of the Locked On Podcast Network's best sports betting website. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk in a little bit more detail, because I've talked about, on the surface, Blue Jackets, much better than they were expected to be. I think, again, I haven't done the specific math, but I think they might have had the biggest increase just in terms of basic points. So the teams that are kind of in competition with them there, the the Blue Jackets went from 66 points to 89 points, which is a 23-point jump, if I'm doing the math correctly. Last season, so the teams that kind of finished around the Blue Jackets this season, the Montreal Canadiens last year finished with 76 points, and this season finished with 91 points, which is, I believe, a 15-point increase. Again, we're doing math on the fly. It's not good. Ottawa Senators finished with 78 points, and finished with 78 points last season, 91 points this season. 97 points this season. So they finished with a 21-point increase or a 19-point increase. So Blue Jackets improved on all of them. The Devils improved as well. They went from 81 to 91 to a 10-point increase. The Washington Capitals, who jumped up the standings, last season had 91 points. This season had 111 points. So again, a 20-point increase. And then in the West, teams that improved, the Sharks improved from 47 points to 52 points. The biggest jump in the West is probably going to be... Actually, you know what? No one really... I guess, okay, the Anaheim Ducks improved from 59 points to 80 points, which is a 21-point increase as well, I believe. So, again, the Anaheim Ducks, a big jump as well. The Utah Hockey Club, who were the Arizona Coyotes last season, I was like, why aren't they on this list? Went from 77 points to 89 points. So, again, a 22-point jump. Calgary Flames didn't improve a ton. I think they improved about 15 points. So, a reasonable amount. But the Blue Jackets, they had the most standings points jump in the NHL. From my quick glance, no one improved more on the points than the Blue Jackets. Now, when we look at the we're not going to go into like the super advanced stats just yet, but the Blue Jackets finished with a +5 goal differential this season. Last season, they had I believe, a -63 goal differential. Yeah, like they improved plus. That is a +68 improvement, I believe, which is so impressive. And I was like, man, I bet no one improved more than that. Like, that is a huge jump. Last season, the team scored 237 goals and allowed an even 300 goals. This season, the team scored 273 goals and allowed 268. So they scored about 35 more goals than they did last year and allowed about 35 goals fewer. So they met in the middle there, which was really nice. Obviously, the goal is to get to the point where you are consistently scoring more than you allow. Possibly the biggest jump is the Washington. I think that was the biggest jump anyway. Was the Washington Capitals, who went from a -37 last season to a +56 this season. Which I can't do that math on the fly, but that's what, like a +80 jump, +85 jump. Genuinely very, very impressive. Other teams that improved, well, the San Jose Sharks were a -150 last season, and were -105 this season. So again, about a +45 jump for them. The Blackhawks went from being -111 to being -70, so about a 40-point jump from them. The Ducks improved from -91 to -42. Like, the Blue Jackets did a lot of good things this season. Mostly it was that they were like red hot at scoring for a lot of the season. And, they did have a couple of areas, let's say, where they just decided to just not score. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe we should say that they struggled with scoring, let's say. that was not, they got shut out. I think there was it 6 or 7 shutouts in the last 6 weeks of the season, which again, if you'd won 2 of those games, you'd be sitting pretty right now. Or you'd be, getting ragdolled by the Capitals. But the Blue Jackets improved in a lot of ways. The offense, I think, was the biggest improvement, which genuinely surprised me because all of the stuff that we talked about before the season, and I talked to Seth Topol of Locked On Wild about Dean Everson coming in, and what kind of coach is he, and what is he going to focus on? And there was a lot of focus from the front office of they need to be better defensively. They need to be better defensively. They're going to improve their defense. The blue line is going to be better. I think so. Maybe I'm alone in this, but I assumed, okay, this team is going to maybe not score a ton of goals, but is going to be much better defensively. And instead, what they did was score, I think, the second most 5-on-5 goals in all situations. Let me just pull that up. They scored at 5-on-5 in the regular season. The Blue Jackets scored. No one scored more 5-on-5 goals than the Blue Jackets in the regular season. Change that to all situations. They dropped down to 8th just because of how diabolical the power play was. But when you look at teams ahead of them or teams just behind them, let's say, they scored more goals this season than the Carolina Hurricanes. They scored more goals than the Edmonton Oilers, the St. Louis Blues, the LA Kings, the Florida Panthers, the Montreal Canadiens, the Ottawa Senators, the New Jersey Devils. These are all playoff teams. The Minnesota Wild were 25th in the league in goals for. Again, it's a playoff team right there. Blue Jackets were better at scoring goals than all of them. If only they'd managed to keep it out of their own net. But we'll talk about that in a second here. The point is, the Blue Jackets were much better offensively speaking than I thought they would be. That I think a lot of people thought they would be. And obviously, scoring goals is where that goes, right? Is where you look at first. But the Blue Jackets were you can't just look at goals for and goals against. You've got to look at, okay, well, how are they creating the offense? How are they are they on just an unsustainably high shooter? And honestly, they might be. The Blue Jackets this season, if I can find a way to, there we go. Okay, the Blue Jackets were 9th in the league in shooting percentage this season. So they shot at 11.2%. They were 10th in the league in shots. So, they were not shooting way above. Some players were. I think Mathieu Olivier is shooting at about 20% this season, which is not sustainable, as fun as it is. But there are other teams with a higher shooting percentage. The Buffalo Sabres had a higher shooting percentage than the Blue Jackets this season. And the highest was the Washington Capitals at 12.6%. So it's not like the Blue Jackets were shooting unsustainably high. They were just scoring a lot more than they were expected to, right? So they scored, if I can pull up the correct stat here, the Blue Jackets ended up being 26th overall in terms of expected goals percentage. So they were expected to score about 48% of their goals. What they actually scored was 50% of their goals. So they basically scored 2% more than they were supposed to. What that turns into is expected goals for. They were expected to score 245 goals. They actually scored 267. They were expected to allow 266 goals. They actually allowed 267. So basically, they allowed one more goal than they were expected, but they scored 21 goals or 22 goals more than they were expected to. So basically, they scored a bunch more than they were supposed to, and they allowed about as many as they were supposed to. So what that means is they were a much more efficient scoring team than they were last season. So last season, they were expected to score 237 goals. They actually scored 234 goals. They were expected to allow 289. They actually allowed 298. So basically, what that means, again, is they scored 4 goals fewer than they were expected to and allowed 9 goals fewer than they were expected to. So they were allowing more goals than expected and also scoring less than expected. The Blue Jackets fixed both of those things. They did not allow fewer goals than expected, but they scored way more than they were expected to. So I am not a statistician. I know just enough about advanced stats to make me dangerous. I cannot explain to you the nitty-gritty details of like expected goals, but as far as I understand it, an expected goal is, because I see a lot of people like, well, who's expecting these goals? Basically, an expected goals are how likely is a shot to be a goal based on how many times a goal has been scored from that specific place with that. So, like, for example, if someone is shooting from 6 feet out of the crease and it's a wrist shot, how expected, like, how many times has that exact position been a goal before? And that's the higher the number of goals scored from that position with that type of shot, the more expected it is to be a goal, right? So, like, a goal from there is much more expected to be a goal than, like, a wrist shot from 10 feet back from there, right? If you're 6 feet away from the goal, it's more likely that you'll score than if you're 10 feet away from the goal or 15 feet or 200 feet away, right? Like, and that's kind of how expected goals works. Again, I don't understand enough math to go into the nitty gritty of it, but that's my layman's understanding, and that is it gets me far enough, you know. So basically, the Blue Jackets were either shooting smarter this season or getting in better positions to shoot, and obviously, you know, luck is involved as well. The Blue Jackets PDO this season, PDO is your basic bog standard luck stat. So it combines your shooting percentage and your save percentage, basically. So Blue Jackets had a PDO of 100.32. You want it to be as close to 100 as possible. Anything below 100 means you're unlucky. Anything above 100 means you are lucky. So the Blue Jackets sitting at about 100.30, sitting at 100.32 means this is more or less what this team is, right? Now, granted, that means that the Blue Jackets were getting probably better shooting and worse goaltending than expected. They had a shooting percentage of, what did I say, 11.2, which means that their goaltending is, again, I'm trying to do math on the fly here, is what, like 89 point something. I don't have just bog standard team save percentage on this spreadsheet, which is that's on me. So we'll have to try and do the math on the fly there. So basically, Blue Jackets had above average shooting, below average save percent. That combines to make the team basically what they are, right? This team did not get lucky necessarily this season, but they also weren't unlucky. Like, this is more or less what this team is. And just for, you know, some kind of comparison, other teams that kind of hovered around there, the Canadians had about 100 in PDO, the Rangers, the Avalanche, the Devils, the Wild, the Senators, they all hovered around about 100% for PDO. Teams above them, the Winnipeg Jets, Lightning, Dallas, Washington, Toronto, St. Louis, LA, and Vegas, they all had 101 or better, which basically means that they were getting, you know, extremely good goaltending as well as good shooting. And then teams below meant that they were getting, so let's look at an example here. The Carolina Hurricanes, extremely unlucky team this season. 98.9% PDO. They had 10% shooting, which means they were getting about 88% goaltending, more or less. You know, so again, just an unlucky team that managed to figure it out, right? Blue Jackets were more or less what they are, right? So we should expect, like, And my point here is that I see a lot of people talking about the unsustainable shooting of the Blue Jackets this season. And yeah, maybe it was a little bit unsustainable. However, I'm not worried that we're going to see a massive fall off last season as things regress back to the mean, because Blue Jackets were basically playing at the mean in total. And what this means is I expect the goaltending to improve next season. I expect the shooting to fall, or the goal scoring to fall off a little bit, but they're not going to score 6 goals a game in 15 games next season. Maybe they will, but I doubt it. They're not going to score as many goals that next season, I don't think, but they should allow way fewer for a combination of improving the defense and improving the goaltending. But I'm not worried that this team is going to fall off a cliff next season. Doesn't feel sustainable, right? Last season, again, for context, the Blue Jackets were extremely unlucky. 98.96 on their PDO. They had a shooting percentage of 9.5. So they've bumped their shooting percentage up by a percentage and a half. And then their goaltending, I believe, is basically about where it is. So they can improve their goaltending and keep their shooting. Let's aim for 10% shooting. Save percentage league-wide was, I think, a 900 on average, so 90%. So you're shooting, that stands to mention, that shooting on average was about 10%. If you can get 10% shooting from this team, you're probably doing okay. Just got to pick up the goaltending. And on that note, I want us to talk about some specific player stats, who improved, who had career years, things like that. So we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about wonderful pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. They're one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller for longer. I love the no shells variety. I am a gremlin. I like to eat pistachios 14 at a time, whether I'm snacking at my desk, whether I'm on a road trip, whether I am just kind of sitting on the couch, mindlessly shoveling pistachios into my mouth. They're always my go-to, but if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snackin and get crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's wrap this up with just kind of a quick look at who had career years for the Blue Jackets, or who improved from last year to this year. And so there's a lot of great options here. Looking at guys who were on the team last year. So Sean Monahan was a great addition. Finished with, he wasn't on the team last year. Where is it? 57 points in 54 games, which I believe is his best point a game pace since that point a game pace he had in Calgary in 2018. Now, admittedly, he wasn't healthy for a lot of the seasons between then and now, but great bounce back season from Sean Monahan. Can't wait to see it again next season. But players that were on the team this year and players that were on the team last year. Zach Werenski, let's start with him at the top of the list. Set records for points by a Blue Jackets defenseman. Was, I believe, tied for second on single season points by any Blue Jacket. He had 82 points in 81 games. He had 23 goals, which sets a record for Blue Jackets defenseman. Last season, he had 57 points with 11 goals. He only played 70 games, but that's only a 0.8 point a game pace. This season, he was just over a point a game pace. So, again, obviously a career year for him. He set records, etc., etc. But also, last season, their leading scorer was Johnny Gaudreau, who had 60 points in 81 games. This season, Zach Werenski had 82 points in 81 games. Kirill Marchenko also finished above that. He had 74 points and 31 goals, which is a career high for him. Last season, he had 42 points and 23 goals. Just massive amounts of growth from Kirill Marchenko specifically. Zach Werenski, I felt like has always had that potential. Kirill Marchenko really popped this year in a way that I didn't think he was going to. But it looks like he's only going to keep getting better from here as well, which is great and a lot of fun. Ken Johnson career highs. Obviously, it's his third year in the league. 57 points in 68 games, 24 goals. Adam Fantilli, his second year in the league, but he set career highs. 54 points in 82 games. After 31 goals after getting 7 goals in his first 35, 40 games. Again, a testament to what happens if you give him Kent Johnson or if you give him Kevin Labanc. Who could possibly see this coming, right? Other players that jumped, Dmitry Vronkov went from having 34 points in his rookie season and 18 goals to 23 goals and 47 points in his sophomore campaign. So no sophomore slump for him. Cole Sillinger, I believe, set a new career high by 1 point. He had 33 points in 66 games. Last year he had 32 points in 77 games. So again, big jump from him. Mathieu Olivier, obviously, went from having a career of, I think, 5 goals and 12 points on the season, had 32 points and 18 goals on the year. So obviously that's a career high for him, which you love to see. Ivan Provorov took a little bit of he improved as well. He had 33 points, 32 as well last season. Playing, I want to say, fewer minutes. He played an average of 23-21 this year and an average of, he played a little bit more actually. So, but he was a -11 last year and a +11 this year. Now, plus minus is not a stat that I hold really any kind of water to, beyond being okay, well, let's look into this. Is it that he's just happens to be on the ice, or is it that he is being involved in goals? So it felt like he was better this year than last year. I think he was much better defensively last year. So the fact that he did that and also put up the same number of points, I think, is impressive, right? Dante Fabro wasn't here last year. Damon Severson, I think, had a down year. He had 25 points this year to 28 last year, playing in more games as well. And everyone else was just kind of there. Boone Jenner, I think, deserves a shout out. He had 19 points in 26 games this season. Last season, obviously, 35 points in 58. So not as many points, but last season he had 0.6 points a game. This season, much smaller sample size, obviously, but 0.73. The last one I'll look at is, I believe, Justin Danforth hit he was one off his career high in goals this season. He had 10 goals in 71 games last season. This season he had 9 goals in 61. So again, improvement in a per game basis, but not on the actual stat sheet where it counts, unfortunately. So, but still, improvement there for sure. I'll be interested to see if he's a Blue Jacket in October, because I could really go either way on. I want to give a shout out to again, the 3 players that finished in the top 11 of scoring for this team. Dante Fabro, who I believe would have finished second or third in terms of scoring by a Nashville Predators defenseman. I think the only Predators that outscored him on the blue line were Brady Shea and Roman Josi. And I believe Brady Shea tied. I believe he was tied with them in terms of goals since becoming a Blue Jacket, which is fun. And then obviously James Van Riemsdyk, who put up 36 points in 71 games as a 36-year-old. And then Sean Monahan, who was the heart and soul of this team for a lot of the season. So shout out to those guys. Obviously, they did not, because they weren't on the team last year, it felt unfair to kind of be like, well, look how much better they were this year than last year. But again, I think those 3 players were part of why this team improved this season. We're kind of running low on time. So we're going to move the rest of this conversation to tomorrow's episode, which is I want to look a little bit more in terms of okay, the Blue Jackets were better here. Why? The Blue Jackets were worse here. Why? They improved overall. Why? And also because we didn't get a chance to talk about it, I want to talk about special teams and how much they basically hamstrung this team this year. Were they better than last season? Were they not better than last season? Did it come out in the wash? We'll talk about all of that on tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jacket. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.